Hello, everyone, and welcome. I thought it would give us an opportunity to be able to look at what these live sessions could look like. All it is changing an opportunity to offer options in the classroom. For some of you who may want to have a different experience than simply online, you have an opportunity to connect with me and your other students in real time. This is what these alternate Zoom opportunities are, is that we could participate and have an hour's worth of a conversation, and then you're essentially off the hook for the rest of the week if you choose. It all depends on how you want to learn and what your best learning style is. So let's think about this from a leadership standpoint. The more we know about ourselves, self-awareness, the more we know about how we can be our authentic selves, the more we can share with others. Remember, there's only two opportunities for situational awareness. We can either change the situation to match our leadership style, or to change our leadership style to match the situation. And so in this case, you have an opportunity in your schedule to be able to schedule a time that we can do a real-time live session. That could be done one-on-one with you and I. We could do a mentoring session or a coaching session, not the same. We could talk about management or leadership, not the same. We also have the ability to have a one-on-one, not just you and I, but here in the classroom, because synergy changes things. And I know that we're trying to give an opportunity to simulate what it might be like in real world classrooms. And I think having the ability, having taught for 25 years, you have the ability to embrace your learning style, which is visual, auditory, kinesthetic, meaning we learn by hearing, we learn by seeing, being part of all of this in the visually, or we learn by doing, or some combination. The more that you know how you learn best, the more you can tell your faculty, such as me, how best to serve you to contribute to your success as a student. I know online is convenient. Matter of fact, yours truly was, oh goodness, invited to participate in online education many, many years ago when I was in Japan, when distance ed is what it was called. And we had a VCR tape and an email address. And then that eventually morphed into the various opportunities that we have now. 5 different hybrids, essentially. So it really kind of depends on what you may work best. And I'm not convinced that any one in particular is the end all be all. I think because of this digital world we live in, we have the ability to talk about things and to be able to use different tools in our toolbox, not just because of what happened during COVID, but simply a different tool depending on the situation that might have a more effective outcome. For example, when we are talking about controversy, for example, or if you're going to have a not so pleasant conversation with feedback, we praise in public, we critique in private. But sometimes we need those nuances, right? We need to see somebody's eyes. We need to see their facial expression. We need to hear the tone in their voice and all of the nonverbals. And those can be an amazing thing that many employers seem to think that we've lost a little bit because we're going too far into only an online environment or maybe only in an auditory environment. Many of you have chosen to meet with me and we've done most of our meetings by phone instead. We miss the nonverbals. We miss the excitement, the enthusiasm, the eyebrows in there, the concerned face, the pause. And so those are the interesting things for us to think about. I also want to be able to look at some of the things that we can talk about in our rooms regarding ethics, culture, and diversity. You happen to have the opportunity that because I happen to be an ethics professor as well, that there are, as I've mentioned, up to 24 ethical theories or more, depending on whose schools of thought you might subscribe to. And our goal is not to go answer shopping. In that, I mean, but if you don't like mom answers, you ask dad. If you don't like mom and dad's answers, you go ask grandma or grandpa or Aunt Sue or Uncle Fred, whatever that may be. But you want to have the opportunity to be able to look at how do you live your life as a person, as a leader, as a follower. And ethics give us the ability of how we have our personal code of ethics. We have a few Marines in the class, I think. And so there's a very specific Marine code of ethics. Every branch of the service, I was a former Air Force wife, have a very specific ethics code. Different institutions, such as the Association for Accountants or human resources, they all have their, or project managers. I have a few of you that are in that category, and those have a specific code of ethics. And all they are is institutional gathering of the things that we hold dear in our respective philosophies and fields of discipline. The question becomes is what's the opportunity to be able to look at this? So let me offer you a couple of options. First of all, let's look at the idea of Aristotelian ethics. That essentially is the most akin to, say, the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal. Those are absolutes, black and white, no middle ground. Either you did or you didn't. And this is something that the UCMJ would be very clear about. Either you stole something or you didn't. Didn't matter why. But now there are some ethical theories. Deontology, for example, looks at intent. Consequentialism looks at outcome. So, for example, if somebody stole something but for the right reasons, would we have a different feeling about them? Would we consider it ethical if a starving family stole a loaf of bread because their very existence for them and their children were threatened? Then we might have more compassion with understanding, yes, stealing is wrong, Aristotelian ethics, but the consequences for why they did it, deontology, the intent, and the outcome. They were simply trying to survive. And while it may be wrong, maybe there's a bit of understanding and compassion. And according to the law, there might be a different outcome that might be assigned in terms of consequence, settings, whether or not a punishment was assigned, a fine was assigned, et cetera, et cetera. So now we look at the idea of universalism. Oh, this one's a good one that most students really like is there a one size fits all? Can we have a specific one ethical premise for everything and for everyone that's out there? Remember, ethics, diversity, and culture. We've been talking a lot in class, and the fact going, how do we respect our culture without disrespecting someone else? Is there a universality here? We've talked about physical attributes that sometimes you look somebody in the eye for an American culture as an individualistic society that is self-sufficient, self-confident. It's a powerful. For some cultures that are a collectivistic society and a little bit different, staring somebody in the eye can be absolutely insulting. And so learning about these characteristics, because different cultures look on different ethical behavior very differently. And so how do we find that balance? Because again, when I'm speaking to these ethical theories, these are mostly through Western eyes that we're looking for in terms of, is there such a universality? Let me propose the fact that there are more than 260 organized religions. They can't all be right. They can't all be wrong. So how do we find the fact, particularly if two religions are diametrically opposed to each other, who wins? Remember that yardstick we talked about in class? The yardstick is being, who decides that ethnocentrism, right? That our way is the right way because it's our way. Maybe not. There's also postmodernism, which means we can all be right simultaneously from our point of view and from our cultural point of view. Just by wearing a specific method of dress, by wearing a specific type of adorning for earrings or not, or jewelry or not. Those are things that are sometimes culturally specific, sometimes religiously specific, sometimes moral. Don't confuse ethics with moral and cultural and all of that either. Each one of these are very, very different shades. So is there a universality? If we look at the idea of Taoism, for example, I'm sorry, Taoism, that means that every life is important, to include that cockroach in the corner, that scorpion in the corner. Everything happens to be this flow of energy within the universe. And so we would not want to dissipate or belittle or think that somehow we are all powerful being as human beings, that we are more important than any life form that's on there. Very difficult to be able to bridge that gap, at least for me, with scorpions, snakes, and spiders. But it would be great that as long as you're not in my present, go off in your life and be your own thing. But boy, if you're near me or threatening me or my dogs, I'm going to help us have a self-survival Darwinian instinct, and self-preservation will win. So the hard part is looking at this as a right or wrong mentality. And again, Aristotelian ethics, that of Aristotle, is the only one that's truly black and white. universality of, yes, there's a quest for perhaps perfectionism, perhaps the utopian world of having everyone learning to play nice in the sandbox and to be able to cultivate the ability of the idea of praxis, which means, can think of it as a glove, is how close can we get to perfection, knowing that we're humans and we're flawed and we're never going to quite get there. So when we're looking at some of these different types of ethical theories, I think perhaps the most adaptable might be moral relativism, where the morals are relative to the situation and the culture in discussion. That might the best way to be able to do it's relevant to the situation because the situation changes, the people changes. Many of you in your reflection blogs have indicated how you've changed over time, and research will tell us that we will get more ethical as we get older. Why? More trips around the sun, more understanding, more experience, more knowledge. Remember, our goal here is to expand our toolbox and to be able to move beyond just putting tools into the toolbox, merely identifying that these are wrenches and screwdrivers and channel locks and vice grips. Having a name helps us from a brain standpoint. We know where in the brain to be able to put it in a file cabinet. Maybe we might know because of its name and its function what it can do. But there's a lot of crossover. I think we may have talked about that. If the goal was to have a picture on the wall and I needed a hole and a nail in that hole to put the picture on the wall, I might easily just use a shoe, something that was a hard surface, but it fixed the problem, but maybe not in the way that I would have intended. Why? Because if I needed a picture on the wall, I don't necessarily have to have a nail to do it. You know, those sticky things that you pull on in college dorms so you don't leave any marks for the landlord. Those kinds of things have some interesting applicability, but that's our goal for this class is to be able to put those tools in your toolbox so you can expand the tools. Maybe the tools you already have, there's a new use for them, a new application, or hey, I didn't know you could do that with that. Remember, if we put that toolbox on the kitchen table and we see the different levels of expertise in the hands of a master carpenter, it might be Picasso. In the hands of someone like me, I'm lucky I can put, a picture on the wall, although I did replace my faucet in the bathroom with a lot of labor and a lot of help from YouTube and others. But the idea is, how do we try and come together with this kind of topic we're looking at? Again, ethics, cultural diversity. When we all can't be right, we all can't be wrong. So if we ask a fundamental question, how do we all play nice in the sandbox? Is there ever going to be a time where leadership and management and simply relationships between humans could be simply colorblind? Could be demographic blind, meaning it doesn't matter what our gender is, what our eye color is, what our culture is, what our national origin is, what we were born as, etc. None of those characteristics would matter because we would have an open mind to be able to be curious and to be able to experience another culture. I mentioned the story when I was in Japan as a spouse that we, as the spouse, and yes, it was a wife at the time because that was quite a few decades ago, that the fact that there weren't many women in combat, women overseas, etc., it was definitely the wife. And we were invited to the cultural briefing, and it was wonderful to be able to have an invitation to another culture. That home was ours for more than a year and a half. And for us to experience things we assumed we know, we also know what that assumptions can be. Bias and prejudice. We're all prejudiced. We're all biased based on our basis of enculturation, acculturation. Those are the terms, again, the things that I've shared with you in class. If any of these terms are new to you, I'm intentionally not defining all of them because this is an intent to be able to bring out that curiosity, to give you things of, what is Doxy talking about? Maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did about some of these things, because we want to be able to expand that toolbox. And remember, if all we have is a hammer, isn't it a coincidence that everything looks like a darn nail, right? So I want you to be able to take the time to be able to dig a little bit deeper, because I know many of you have not had such great experiences with managers and leaders in the past. Know that those are titles, not functions, and someone does not have to be a leader that has the title and power as boss. A leader and a manager are things that you do as verbs, not who you are, and not certainly where you sit. It's function. So we might want to look at that. And some of you haven't had great experiences. And I always get this question of going, well, Doc C, and I'm not sitting in front of my I Love Me wall, sorry, but I have an I Love Me wall that has all of my diplomas and certifications on the wall, but I'm not in my office today. But that I Love Me wall demonstrates credentials I've earned, but that doesn't guarantee the quality of how I earned them or how much did I get A's? Did I do very well? Was I perfectionistic? Did I have internships? Did I have practical experience? And this is the challenge is a lot of people, for example, here in class, I want to get you out of the book because the book means you can define the tool. You can show me all the people who've used the tool. You can take a test on the tool. You can write it a paper, you can write a reflection blog and tell me all the wonderful things about the 40 or actually up to 65 different kinds of leadership. But the quintessential secret sauce, if you will, is do you know how to use it? And that's where a lot of your complaints have come over the years, not just in this class but if you have these impressive I Love Me walls and they went to Harvard and Yale and Brown and all the top schools, why are they such a lousy leader? Why are they such a lousy manager? Because part of what is missing that I want to introduce you to in the classroom is it's not enough to have it passive. Again, reading it in a book, not everything. Being able to write a paper about it, define it, reflection blog, not everything. When we start to get into groups and start using this, there's the secret sauce. Anything that we're teaching you doesn't live in a book, doesn't live on paper. These are active dynamics between people. And sometimes people don't get along. You know your learning style, you've experienced some of your personalities, some of your specific preferences, and not everybody's going to match. There are lots of divorces in the world, and I don't just mean between a husband and a wife. There are divorces when people get fired or are asked to leave or leave voluntarily simply because it's not a good fit. And so we want to be able to help you understand how do you use these tools. That's why the power of observation is fantastic. Let's see who gets it right. Where are those wonderful organizations that nobody ever wants to leave? Think about Zappos and Tony Hsieh and the way he designed his company. People come to Vegas all over the world to be able to find out what did Tony know that no one else did. I lived in Vegas for 12 years. Finally, at the urging of a fellow colleague of mine, went and took the tour of Zappos. And Zappos is not something you can read about. It's not even something you can experience through a video. You have to be on ground to feel this energy and to get that connection that we often miss when we're online. Even here, not sure I can convey to you my excitement when you're looking at you're only in a video as opposed to in a classroom. And yes, I did teach in a classroom for many, 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 many years. And I miss some of that because I'll teach classes maybe a little bit differently because there's a little bit we can do when we're together that is a little bit more difficult if we're only online or if we're only doing asynchronous, which means what we're doing in class that you post and then maybe a few hours later, a few days later, somebody else posts. Those kinds of synergies are an interesting way to learn. But there's lots of different ways, and that's why I want you to experience them and encourage you to take live classes as well as online classes, or take a hybrid if given the opportunity, or take an Eagle Vision class. And why is because different ways of seeing the world are going to help you expand that toolbox and to go from being a novice to an apprentice to a master. And when you look at some of these, and we've talked about some of these scenarios in class, these amazing situations that have happened, right? And you watch these, leaders who are in crisis, love them or hate them, read the book by Rudy Giuliani regarding 9/11 with having no script for being a leader with what happened in New York. And you read the book, and it was scary because they were making it up minute by minute by minute. That's leadership. Trying to hope that you get it more right than wrong in crisis management. That's leadership. When you're trying to help folks and maybe think of that one situation when you were growing up, might have been, and I hear these situations in class all the time, you were 5 years old and you stole penny candy from 7-Eleven and your mom marched you right back to the 7-Eleven to tell the clerk and to confess your sins, so to speak. That's leadership. Because those difficult conversations are the crucial conversations in leadership. And it talks about ethics and about doing well and about knowing right from wrong. And it's questionable with some of their outcomes and whether it's all in it for them, whether it's servant leadership where you have the ability to think of someone else way before yourself. If you're a leader and you have at least one person following you, my personal belief is you have lost the right to only think about yourself. It's not about you anymore. You're having someone else in the picture or many someone else's. I mean, some companies you could have one, you could have 10,000 or a million people around the world and what that looks like. So let me offer you some things to think about as I bring this kind of to a close. We don't do lectures anymore, and I was hoping that somebody might be able to join us today. But just in case you have the opportunity, you can still, excuse me, benefit from such a video to be able to think about really just one fundamental question. What kind of leader do you want to be? What's the experience that, particularly in this idea of ethics, diversity, and culture, how do you want people to experience you? Do they want to leave going, oh my gosh, greatest person I've ever met. How exciting. This is fantastic. I can't wait to be there. And they light up a room every time they walk in the door and just people just gravitate like, moth to a flame. It's just energy and magic. Watch those things. Learn how they do that. It is really an art. And by the same token, those who repel that, when you're seeing some of the presentations and a boss that you don't care for, a meeting that doesn't go well, and everyone's rolling their eyes and they suck the energy out of the room the minute they walk in, same kind of thing. The more you can observe, the more you can say, yes, more of that, less of that. This is what I want to be as a legacy. And so that's what I'm going to leave you today is we're going to be wrapping up the final weeks of our class here. We want to be able to look at what kind of leader do you want to be? What is the legacy you want to be known for to leave behind? And you can do this one of two ways. I've done this every time I've earned a new degree. The legacy exercise is always this. Write your obituary. And if that's a little bit too morbid or maudlin, then go ahead and write your humanitarian award speech as if you were getting the humanitarian award of the Academy Awards or at the United Nations or something like that. Write a paragraph of what it is you want to accomplish at the end of your life. When I did this during my undergrad, I was very disappointed because I hadn't done anything yet. I was all of 18 years old. But as I had more trips around the sun and had more accomplishments and more things that I did, then it got to the point of, yeah, I'm okay with something would happen today. What would be written about me? Would it be some amazing things that I've done in my life? And that's what we want to talk about with leaders. And what kind of a leader and what kind of a person and a human being do you want to be when the end comes? So I will leave you with that thinking. We can certainly transfer this online after you've had a chance to listen to the video and all that. And we can do this alternative Zoom as you are interested in. I'm happy to take requests for times and time zones and different days to see what might be more available for us. But if you prefer a one-on-one real-time synergy, let's use that. It's a tool we have in the classroom, and I'm happy to be able to offer that to you. So I'm Dr. C. Glad to see you on this Thursday afternoon. I wish you well and thoughts of spring. See you around the quad. Take care. Bye-bye.